Hello! So, welcome to my channel and my first video as well. Today I'll be talking about Madame Bovary specifically. Now, a few things first of all. I do apologize for my accent, it's terrible, I'm Polish. I will be getting more accent softening lessons so it doesn't sound so terrible. So, if you want to subscribe to my Subscribe Star, it's in the description of the video. Feel free. Also, this is still like makeshift setup because again, I'm just starting. But anyway, so I want to talk about Madame Bovary specifically today because it's simply one of the biggest, most important books of French literature, to be honest. Gustave Flaubert is one of the. He's basically a genius, to be honest. So it took him 5 years to write the book. Now, the thing about it is that over that 5 years, he was mainly just editing over and over and over again. What's also very fascinating about that is that, so he would obviously, as you would in 19th century, he would exchange letters with a lot of people, specifically women. So, for example, if you read the letters from him to George Sand, you would see a lot of you would actually be able to gauge his whole creative process, which is just amazing. So you don't only have the book itself, but you can also understand everything behind that to know how he came up with what he did, if that makes sense. And again, the guy himself, it's very important to bring up a few things from his own life in order to understand Madame Bovary a lot. So, for example, right, first of all, he lived in Paris and he studied law. He despised both. So eventually he actually dropped out of uni and he left Paris and he decided to just go off and travel for a bit. So he went to Middle East, Beirut, I think, some other places. And then he was so well traveled, eventually he got syphilis. Yeah. And that's another thing about him. He was generally a liberal, and he was also a pantheist. So he believed in that all-encompassing God, and that is very visible in his books as well. So a lot of people a lot of characters in the book are quite opposed to religion in itself, and then the church and the priests are generally shown as fairly incompetent in a way. So that's the thing about him. And then, so obviously he was the proponent of this whole style that's called literary realism. So he wanted to make sure that everything's aesthetically perfect. He also wanted to make sure that his prose is better than poetry. So he would literally polish every single sentence to make sure that it was as well done as possible. And you can see that in the book as well, the way he shapes certain phrases, the way he describes places as well. You may think that, a description is just for the placement, just for the setting. Not with Flaubert. The thing about him is, if he describes a certain place, it usually tells you a lot about what's going to happen or what the character views it as. So it's really well done. I'm going to bring up a few examples later on. And that's the thing. Another thing. So after Madame Bovary was written, Flaubert and his publisher got sued for immorality. Now, they got acquitted, which was quite good. And eventually Madame Bovary ended up becoming a bestseller. So also, when I said that it was written over a period of 5 years, that was between 1851 to 1856. So that's the 5-year period he was writing it in. So the book became a bestseller, so that was very successful. Interestingly enough, at a very similar time when Flaubert's book Flaubert was taken to court, at a very similar time, Baudelaire got taken to court as well, and he got defended by the same person who wrote, it was he was defended by the same person who was defending Flaubert. Sadly, because Baudelaire tends to be more obscene, um, he didn't win the trial or the lawsuit, so he had to remove quite a lot of poems from his collection. Which, if you ever read Le Fleur de Mal, you would see why this happened, because they are quite spicy in a way. Um, but yeah, Flaubert was quite successful. Um, he did manage to win the lawsuit, and then another few things were that he hated children. That could definitely be seen in the book too, which again I will speak about more often, like more in more detail later. Um, his influence was so massive that at the time when he was still alive, he was he was a protege of Guy de Maupassant, or Guy de Maupassant was his protege, um, and they both basically. So Maupassant was known for a book called Bel Ami. It was basically about this guy who, I think he started off very fairly poor, but then eventually he ended up um, manipulating very wealthy women and getting to the top of society. It was quite funny. A very good book. I would also recommend it. And another thing is he influenced Kafka in a way. Kafka was absolutely amazed with the style of Bovary of Flaubert's writing, um, and so did Nabokov actually. What is extremely interesting is the fact that Nabokov actually referenced Madame Bovary in his own book Lolita. There is a very similar scene um, where I think Lolita plays piano, and the scene is just almost identical to Madame Bovary. I remember the first time reading Lolita, right? And that was after I read Madame Bovary. I was like, I literally recognize the scene from somewhere. Why does it seem like plagiarism? This, I've read this, and I was like, do I have a déjà vu or something? And then, and I looked up the annotations, and it actually turned out that he did specifically referenced Madame Bovary in that specific scene. It was very important for the development of the plot further. It was just amazing. So yeah, another thing about Flaubert is that he really hated middle classes. He considered them superficial. He thought that they were just their opinions were very shallow, that they took them from other people, and they were very, just theater. Imagine, right? You know the journalists from London. They all live in a bubble. They all hang out together, and they go to the same bars and they meet the same people. You know, it's kind of a vicious circle, right? It's quite similar with middle classes in France at the time, and Flaubert wasn't really very keen on that. What's quite interesting, though, right? So Emma Bovary, the main protagonist of the book, she is from the middle classes, and she's got quite a few traits that you would consider that you would think that Flaubert would hate them and would make her an example of one of those people. However, it's it's a very interesting complex scenario where Emma's a lot of Emma's ideas are also Flaubert's ideas. So it's a complex person. You're not supposed to either hate her or love her. Maybe you're supposed to pity her. At least that's what I did when I was reading the book. That's how I felt. Um, well, we could we could probably get through to talking about the book itself. So first, a few things about Emma Bovary. What Flaubert's doing really well in his book is that he first paints the scenario of Charles, so her husband, and his childhood, and up until he gets married to his first wife. Um, and then Charles meets Emma, and then we get her viewpoint, um, which is very well done because so Madame Bovary, from the very start, you understand that she had this very she didn't really have an exciting life up to their marriage. More she had a very good imagination. She was hoping for things to happen. She had a very flamboyant imagination. She was expecting life to be this beautiful, amazing things with exciting things happening, with beautiful words and beautiful things and flowers and fireworks and everything, Just she expected more. That's the point. And then but then again, she didn't really know that much when she was younger. She was brought up at a farm. She was a daughter of a fairly affluent farmer, and then she got sent to the convent. The thing is, right, when she was there, she didn't really. She wasn't there for the religion. She wasn't a religious person. She was there for the flowers, for the choir, for the beautiful things, for the paintings, um, for the emotions. Basically, she was a very emotional person. She was hoping for just it was stirring her soul. So that's why she loved it so much. And then she marries Charles. And now let's put Madame Bovary aside for a moment and focus on Charles. Charles had a very dull childhood. She got sent to school late, and she was always a runner-upper. He wasn't excelling on anything. The the peak for him was literally just meeting some prostitutes. So he didn't really have an exciting life. On top of that, so he was trying to qualify as a doctor. He didn't even get the certification that would make him a proper GP. He got like a lesser officer of health certificate. So he wasn't even a proper doctor. Now he saw Emma and he was like, "Oh my god, she's got those beautiful eyes and she's got this beautiful hair and everything's so amazing." And instantly he wanted to marry her, but he didn't even have balls to ask her. So her father had to do it for him because he was interested. And then, but the thing is, Charles still had a wife at the time. I'm going to stop everything that I'm saying right now just to read you a very funny fragment, which I absolutely loved. So Charles met Emma because her father broke his leg. So because Bovary was the nearest doctor, he went to the farm to fix her father's leg. And then he saw Emma at the same time. And then he would come back every now and then to make sure that the leg was healing properly. But obviously, he was still a married man. So, because his wife wasn't really a very important part of the book, he had to do something about her. So, it's very important how the first wife's death is painted in the book. So, this literally says, "A week after, as she was hanging up some washing in her yard, she was seized with a spitting of blood, and the next day, while Charles had his back turned to her, drawing the window curtain, she said, 'Oh God,' gave a sigh, and fainted. She was dead. What a surprise!" It's literally in the book. It's so amusing. But that's the thing. So, his wife's dead. So, what's he going to do now? So he befriended Emma's father, and then developed feelings for Emma, and then they got married. So we now have this beautiful, easily excitable female who loves excitement, who loves theater, who wants things to happen. So she's very excited about marriage, hoping for things to finally happen, like constantly waiting and waiting. So she thinks, marriage, perfect. That's going to be something that's going to change everything, right? Right? And then Charles, very bored, finally he's got a beautiful wife. Finally he's got someone who he actually genuinely cares about. And so it starts. So, first of all, there's a sentence in the book that already says that Emma didn't really like the house where he lived because it was a small house, right? They lived in Tost. I do apologize if I mispronounce things. Sometimes it just happens. Um, I think it's Tost. So when he moved there, he also had his doctor's practice there. So you would have the smell of melted butter coming from the kitchen, getting through to the medical room, and then obviously you would have the smells from the medical room going into other rooms, and vice versa. So Flaubert's already painting the whole place quite terribly. So you already know what to expect. And Emma gets in and she sees the bride's bouquet of his previous wife, and she's just like, right, it's kind of like she's still alive. So she's not really happy about that. And then, surprise, surprise, soon after she realizes that her marriage was a mistake. But now, what are you going to do? Now let's put everything aside, right? Let's try to relate to Emma for a moment. Imagine that you're stuck in a fairly unhappy relationship where your partner loves you very much, but you don't really love them that much. They're not very. They're not a Chad. They're a virgin. They're not really excelling on anything. They're very mediocre. They don't do anything special. They don't. They're not even interested in the same things you are. They don't want to go to theater. They don't want to read books. They don't. They just have no interest in their personal development. So you could imagine how she felt very stuck. And then you have the then it continues, and then she's also stuck in this very small village. There's nothing happening. What is she supposed to do? So they buy her a dog, and it's like, cool, fine. So she's got something to talk to. Great. But she's not very happy because, again, she's not happy in this marriage. Um, and that's the thing. I'm going to go back to speaking about Charles a little bit because he's not a bad guy, okay? He's just boring. He's a mediocre doctor. He doesn't really have that much going for him, but he's a good guy. He's a good man. He loves her to bits. He cares about his family. He's not bad. He's not a terrible person. It's just he's not really good for her. That's about it. So then, she's already unhappy, and that's the thing. Then she goes to the ball. This is a very important scene. So Flaubert, in many of his books, he tries to make a point of putting at the peak of the book the main part quite at the start. So in Madame Bovary, he did that with the ball. With some other books, he did that literally in the first paragraph, where the most important thing that happens at the start, which makes it very interesting because you know that from then onwards it's just downhill. So basically, she gets invited to this fancy event, right? And there's champagne, there's great food, there's people are waltzing, there's dancing, there are rich people, there's a viscount who takes her to waltz with her. And then there's also very interesting parallel between the way Emma behaves at the ball. She's excited, she loves it. She's dancing with people, she's chatting to people, she's eating everything, she's drinking champagne. This is the time of her life. And then there's Charles. He's literally standing in a corner, watching some other people play games, and eventually he falls asleep. It just doesn't work. So that's the whole thing. And then eventually they leave the ball, and she keeps thinking about it. She keeps trying to remember what happened, thinks about the Viscount and stuff. But then the memory just fades, and she realizes that she just left empty and extremely unhappy. So you know how it is, like in 19th century, when someone's like not feeling very well, they instantly just send them to another city, and they have like so many different symptoms. No one knows what's happening, but they're basically just depressed. So she's not really feeling well. So they decide to move to Yonville. Yonville's a fictitious town, by the way. That's quite important to remember. Um, so they so before they move out, she realizes she's pregnant. Um, it's also a very important part here. Um, so they Charles picks Yonville for her. What I was thinking when I was reading that part was that the description of Yonville was trying to make you realize that there's nothing happening in Yonville. Um, I'm pretty sure that I've read that someone was trying to paraphrase Yonville as Yawnville, as in when you yawn because something's so dull. That's why it's called Yonville. So it's quite that. It's quite amusing. I don't think this was Flaubert's intention, though. By the way, there's just someone else coming up with it and calling it something else. I think maybe it was the serialized cartoon, maybe. Anyway, so they move there. The whole place is quite boring. They have maybe what I found very amusing actually was that they had one pub that was called Lion d'Or, which is literally the equivalent of our English King's Arms. So you already know that they have pub that just has its common name. They don't even have proper cathedral, I think. There's just fields. It's terrible. So that's the very fun part about it. It's just she's moving from Tost to an even worse place. So it's not very good. So she moves there. She has that child. And she doesn't really care about the child. As I said previously, you see a lot of influences from Flaubert. The child appears maybe 4 times in the book, and most of the time is just to show the interaction between the child and Emma gives absolutely no. She doesn't care about the child at all. It's either with the nurse or with the servant or somewhere else. Simple as. And again, you see a lot of Flaubert's ideas there to quite such big extent. So yeah, she basically tries to live in that Yonville, and she's not very happy about it. They meet a few people who live there. So there's the Omer, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's with a H, but you don't pronounce the H. Shut up. So Omer, he's not really into religion, and the one thing that shows up quite a lot in the book is that you've got Omer, who's anti-religion, and then you've got the priest, and they often fight over those petty little things, and it's quite amusing. It's really well done, so I do recommend that. But yeah, then she meets Leon, or Leon. I'm trying to show off. I used to study French, but yeah, I'm pathetic now, so as you can probably see. The point is, right? So she meets Leo, and suddenly he's this well-read, interesting man who loves poetry, who loves feelings, who loves emotions. He's just amazing. And he listens to music. He can sing. He can read. Just perfection. So she hangs out with Leon a lot. And then you get a lot of scenes where there's Leon and there's Charles. Charles is being very dull. I'll actually show you a few of those bits because they're quite interesting. I hope I'm not boring you already. But yeah, feel free to subscribe to the video, by the way. To my channel, I meant. And like the video. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Yes. So yeah, right. So here we go. We've got this bit. So they describe Madame Bovary speaking to Leon, and they have great chat. They have fantastic times, and it's all amazing. And then suddenly there's this Charles shows up, and it's just like bits of straw stuck in his red hair, and he limped with his left leg, and it's just terrible. He's just terrible, and it's clear that she doesn't really like him that much. So then obviously things between Emma and Charles are going more and more sour, and things between her and Leon grow. and she spends time with him, and it's amazing. It's all very sweet. And then suddenly, she realizes that she's got feelings for him. Damn. What is she supposed to do? She's literally married. She can't really elope, because what are they going to do if they elope? She's got a child as well, so it's, it makes it a bit difficult at this point. So she tries to stop her. She's basically So she tries to prevent herself from loving Leon, basically. So she gets thrown into a bunch of different things. She suddenly realizes that she loves her child very much, and other children too. She then decides to take up charity, because why not? She becomes this fantastic housewife. She always makes sure that his shoes are clean, that the slippers are ready, that his meals are tasty, and she's very lovely, but it's all a pretense. She hates Charles. It's just not, it's not working. So then she goes to the priest to speak to him. This is a very good scene as well, because you can see literally that Flaubert doesn't really like religion in a way, because she goes over to him and she's like, "Oh yeah, right. So I'm so terrorized. I need support. I need help." And he's like, "Do you need some rest? I think you should go home and to get some rest." But she keeps trying to tell him that she wants his like spiritual guidance, and he's like, "What do you mean?" But again, that's Flaubert's influence on the book as well. So eventually, it keeps going on. She hates Charles. She loves Leon. Tries to stop it and stuff. Eventually, Leon moves to Paris. He's gone. So obviously, what happens? She gets a bit depressed again. But she finds a new fancy. She starts buying things. She buys things a lot. There's this guy called Leroux. He offers her things and she accepts the things, and then she can always pay them back later and stuff. So she gets into debt. Yes. And then eventually there's this mysterious man coming to Mr. Bovary for some bloodletting. So, and he's very attractive. He notices Emma. Now the thing about Rodolphe is that he's literally a womanizer. He's terrible. You can see it from the very start. He's like, ooh, she's hot. I'm going to. I wonder. She's probably bored. I should probably do something to, make her mine. And it's just, you straight up know what he wants. He's like, oh, my mistress getting a bit fat. I should probably get another one. She will do just fine. So it's quite amusing. So then he keeps trying, he pushes, and then there's a fantastic scene. There's a agricultural show happening, right? Now, when they attend the show, she comes with Rodolphe. Charles was probably, I don't know, being boring somewhere else. And they go to a room to be like, so they can view the show from the window. And he tries, like, he says nice words to her, and Flaubert does this really cool thing where, like, you've got a very long part of the speech from during the agricultural show that is being intertwined with their own conversation, and it's done very well. It's like, so the agricultural show is just, it's this pompous speech just to like, oh yeah, we care about you farmers, you peasants, sure we do. Obviously they don't, but they're just trying to put up a show. Now at the same time, Rodolphe is trying to do a very similar thing with Emma. He's just trying to put on a show. He's just both the guy who's doing the speech and Rodolphe. They're both using just cliches and a very dull language just to get their point across, and it works. It enamors the public and it enamors Emma. But she pretends. She still tries to resist and stuff. And it's working for the time being. But then Rodolphe decides that he should probably teach Emma how to ride horses. She's like, no. She's like, I don't have like an outfit. I don't have a horse. I can't do it. Which was probably quite smart because she was trying to resist. But then Charles literally throws her into Rodolphe's arms because he's like, oh, but you know what? You would do well with some, horse riding. So Rodolphe says that he will get her a horse. And then Charles orders her an outfit. And then they go off. He's trying to literally pounce her, basically. He's like grabbing her waist and stuff. And she's like, no, please stop, take me back home. And she's trying to resist, but eventually he like brings her close. And she gives in. And from them on, she becomes her lover. And there's this, right, I need to find this in the book because that's another very good scene. So as she was trying to resist, then she realizes that she's had this idea of a lover. Like, for someone who's so emotional and he's so easily excitable, there's this like, ooh, having a lover sounds actually quite exciting. I should have one. And you know what I mean? It's kind of like when I had my first boyfriend. I only wanted to have a boyfriend because I've never had a boyfriend. So it was like, oh my god, this guy wants to be my girlfriend. Guess I'll go with it. You know what I mean? It's just ticking boxes, really. So that's what she did, and then she just completely fell into his arms. I should probably do that thing again. Subscribe to my channel and like the video now. If you haven't done that yet, do it now. Yes. God, where is it? Can't find it. Give me 1 second. So basically, she sees herself. She sees her own reflection. She's like, "Oh, I look so good like this." Confused with a lover, and she literally says, something subtle about her being transfigured her. She repeated, "I have a lover, a lover," delighting at the idea as if a second puberty had come to her. So at last she was to know those joys of love, that fever of happiness of which she had despaired. So she's super excited about the whole thing. So they start shagging, basically. It keeps happening. And another thing about Flaubert is that he doesn't make the book overtly sexual, which is done extremely well. So he knows very well how to manipulate the text to just, she visits him and stuff, but it's not, there aren't many details about this, which is very well done. So that's another thing. They constantly spend time together. She no longer really cares that much. She just wants to, he lives like on the outskirts of Yonville. So she takes like a very wild route to get there. She bumps into someone by accident who was there hunting ducks, but then hunting ducks there was illegal. And she shouldn't have been in those bushes either. So those two people bump into each other, and they're both like, right, neither of us should be there. So then the guy who sees Emma never says anything, so she's safe. But it's very risky, and then she eventually becomes too much. She's, she constantly asks for the same cliches, for the same words. She throws herself on him, and it's just terrible. He's getting slightly bored, but he's like, fine, I'll just put up with it. And then something happens, right? So, as I said, Charles is very mediocre, okay? He doesn't really do anything. There's a scene where he subscribes to this medical journal, and he can't even be arsed reading the whole thing. So he starts reading it, and he's like, oh no, I'm so tired, I need a nap. And he never does that. And she absolutely despises him for that. She's so resentful about this, because he can't, if he's at least a doctor, even if they don't share so many interests, at least he could be, a good doctor. He can't even improve his own skills. it must get quite disappointing. So so there's this so Ome, the anti-realist chemist I mentioned at the start, um, he decides to convince Charles into doing this new new modern surgery on clubfoot, right? Um, and he's saying that if Charles performs it well, then he's going to be known, he's going to get all the fame and stuff. As soon as Emma hears it, she's like, "Excuse me, excuse me." So that's the thing. So everyone's trying to encourage Charles to do the surgery. He's a bit scared, but eventually he gives in. There's the peasant stable boy, who agrees to the procedure because he's got clubfoot. So they're doing it. So the procedure was about so if I get this well, right, it literally says you will merely feel possibly a slight pain. Is a simple prick, like little bloodletting. So there's the prick, they do that thing, and then they put the foot in a box, right? So Charles does the procedure. Everything's great, everyone's happy, and they're like, "Oh my god, the guy's going to now walk properly. There's going to be no issues." So, so he puts the foot in the box, and they just put him somewhere. After a few days, it turns out that his foot starts to hurt a lot. He screams, he asks for support, and they're like, "No, we can't take the box off. It has to be taken off only after a few days." So they don't do it. So he continues to scream, and he's like, "Oh my god, this is unbearable. Please take the box off." They take the box off. It turns out there's gangrene. It's terrible. So they don't know what to do. They want to maybe we could try some other things. They try to put the box back, and it just gets worse. It just gets worse to the point where he's got gangrene up to his thigh. Terrible. So they get a better doctor, and he gallops in on his horse, and he's like, "I'm going to fix that. You just ruined this." And he cuts off the guy's leg. The procedure didn't work. They ruined it. The gangrene spread, and the guys now have no foot. So Emma prodded Charles to pay for the new leg for the guy. So that was quite nice, I guess. So yeah. So then Emma realizes what happens, and she starts resenting Charles even more. Even though obviously this wasn't his fault, but imagine there are those constant pins in your side, constant pins. There's he's not doing this, he's not doing this, he's not doing that, and then he even ruined someone else's clubfoot or actual foot. It's just bad. So she hates him even more. She's very unhappy. She decides to elope with Rodolph. Great idea. Except he doesn't really want to, because obviously she's just his mistress and he's becoming too much. So, so they have a plan. She buys things for the whole elopement. He sends her a letter, basically saying that it was so funny because it's basically this kind of Dear Janet letter. There's nothing. He's doing that on purpose. He knows exactly what to say. He's just like, "Oh, my love, I'm so sorry. I wish I could do that, but I'm doing this for you." And it's just very amusing. So then, so she gets the letter. She's mortified. She gets depressed again, obviously, very terribly. Then she gets very fascinated in religion again. To the point where it kind of verges on blasphemy, because she just gets those things. She surrounds herself with crucifixes and the relics and stuff. It's not really genuine. She only does that because she's upset. So it's quite yeah. So then she gets very excited about charity. Again. She brings some orphans to her house and she starts feeding them. Those orphans are there all the time. She starts fixing clothes for the poor. And it's really not the kind of thing she would be doing. So it's really amusing. Then eventually Charles is like, well, I really want to like fix your situation. I don't want to see you so upset. I know that you like theater. I'm going to make you to go to theater. So they do that, right? So they go to Rouen, go to theater. There she meets Leon again. You can already assume what's going to happen. She, that's when the book gets a bit more sexual. There's the scene where they're in a cab, and they're in a cab for a very long time. Um, in the meantime, she goes absolutely mental with money. She starts overspending. So they have this hotel room where they hang out. So that's another thing, right? She tries to find reasons to go to Rouen to hang out with Leon. Obviously, she doesn't really have that many. So she starts like playing piano, right? She used to do that before as well, but then she starts taking up properly, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm just not doing that well at this. Oh, this is just terrible. Oh, Charles, I wish I had some lessons. I would really like to take some lessons, but I can't. I need to do that in Rouen." So Charles is like, "Fine." Eventually, he concedes and he allows her to take her lessons in piano in Rouen. Except she doesn't really do that. She just goes to hang out with Leon. Um, so she pays for that room. She tries to find some money. She tries to sell some property, and then that doesn't really work out well. And it's just terrible. She gets into terrible debt, and she can't put it off much longer. It gets to the point where she's literally like all of her furniture is going to be sold if she doesn't provide the money. It's bad, really bad. Like she tries to, so she's not really very pleased with Leon anymore. She's not very obviously she doesn't hook up with Rodolphe anymore. She hates Charles. She doesn't know what to do. So Charles already covered some of her previous debt already. So she goes to Leon. She's like, "Oh, if you love me, you're going to give me money, and I need a lot." And he's like, right. He does this English thing where he said that he will see if he can do something about that, and obviously he doesn't. So that doesn't really work out very well for her. So she tries Rodolphe. She hasn't seen him for ages, so she just goes there. She hangs out with him. And it's just like, what does she want? So then he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry about the letter. I was terrible. I'll never do that again. I'll be nice." And she's just like, "Well, could you lend me money?" And he's like, "Dude, I literally have none." And he doesn't. He actually doesn't. So he's like, "Oh, you hate me. You're a terrible, terrible pig." I'm paraphrasing. um. Eventually, she goes back to Rouen. Sorry, not Rouen. Back to where she was staying. She can't find anything to do. She goes to this notary who's very fond of her, but he just tries to. She's asking for money. He basically starts kind of wanting to pounce her, and she's saying no, and she's disgusted with it, so she just leaves, right? No one helps her, so she gets back. And then the only thing she can come up with is the fact that she knows for a fact that the chemist has got some arsenic in his secret place. So she tries to. So she gets the key. She just munches on the arsenic. She suddenly feels very serene, and she goes back home. Yeah. You could assume what happens from then onwards. The descriptions are very, very intense. It's really well written. So then eventually she dies, right? After agony and vomiting and everything, it's just terrible. She dies. Then suddenly after her death, Charles just becomes a completely different person. And what's really important is that all of this time we're looking at Charles from Emma's perspective. Now she's dead. We realize that he wasn't really that bad of a person. And he's he's actually trying to like embrace that romantic spirit that she had. You know, he tries to dress differently. He takes up smoking. Um, he even the way he so her funeral. He even makes sure that she's buried in her wedding dress with her hair all over the place, with some green velvet in her hand. It's he makes sure even when he picks her tomb or Mazu, I can't pronounce that, her tomb. Um, she picks the very fancy one that would fit into her um, romantic soul, and then yeah, so that happens. Um, and then Charles finds her love letters, and he's very, very, very angry, and he ends up dying with her lock of hair in his hand. So Charles dies, um, and then the child doesn't really have nowhere to go. So the child ends up working in a cotton mill, and this is actually quite heartbreaking because there's a point where Emma's not. I think she was still having an affair, right? And Charles like goes back home, and he looks at the child. And he's like, "Oh, I'll have to make sure that she gets proper life. I may need to start saving up, and I'm going to make sure that she gets proper education, that she gets proper husband, that she's going to be happy in the future." So that's kind of like Flaubert already signposting that something may not happen the way he wants. And then you know Emma dies, Charles dies, other family members die. Um, they have literally she's got no place to go, so she literally has to work in a cotton mill, and her life's literally ruined. So that was quite, yeah, heartbreaking in a way. And then another thing was that, the chemist, right? He was presented throughout the book as this complete midwit. So as much as Charles wanted to make sure that Emma gets a very nice, very lovely a funeral and everything's perfect, Omer was trying to find an inscription for her, and he couldn't come up with anything, right? So he picks, "Stop, traveler, a worthy wife is buried here." She had like a million affairs, and it just shows even more that the chemist was actually extremely stupid. And then he writes often for this publication based in Rouen, and he starts. So he constantly writes about something really moronic, like, "Oh no, there's this guy who constantly harasses people in the village," and eventually he makes sure that police gets the guy, and he starts feeling the self-importance. And the guy's just ending up. So he really wants to get the cross of honor, cross of. By the way, I know that I should probably edit this video, but I want to say I've got absolutely no video editing skills, but I'm just going to say that I believe in things to be just, rough and unedited because, that's my style. So, yeah. Joking. Anyway, so right, so he wants to get the Cross of the Legion of Honor, right? And he's the biggest moron. He's literally a midwit, okay? He ends up getting that Cross of Honor. His family is getting richer and richer, and the whole point, like the whole thing about the book is that the stupidity triumphs. The stupidity, the harsh, terrible, boring reality wins over the excitement and the authentic romantic spirit. And that's the whole thing about the book. It's just so at some point Charles, when Emma dies, he's like, "Oh no, this is all fatality," and he blames everything on fatality. And in a way, Flaubert's trying to show that whatever way this would go, they can't help it because there is, the fate leads them in the towards the catastrophe. But in a way, like, I don't know, in a way you could say that Madame Bovary is a cautionary tale in a way. You know, maybe make sure that you don't get married to people who are mediocre, or if you're mediocre, maybe don't try to get married to people who are interesting. um, or if you're, you know, maybe don't get into debt because you're sad, or don't try to have affairs because it's not going to lead anywhere good. There are a lot of things that you can take out from the novel, and it is quite, it just, it is really good. But that's the thing, like, stylistically, the book's just beautiful. Um, the way the way Flaubert writes is really compelling. What's quite what's quite funny about this is that, so I've read this book around 10 years ago, maybe in Polish. I don't know if it was translation or what, but it just wasn't the same. I found the book to be quite boring at times. Maybe I just wasn't, you know, old enough to appreciate it. But this time I read it, it was just beautiful from the start to finish. And I honestly recommend this book to literally everyone. It's good. If you're like, it's worth it for the content. It's worth it to, even if you're trying to learn a craft. If you try to learn how to write properly, I think Flaubert is a very good place to start, because you learn how to shape words and signpost certain things, and it's just such a good way to learn craft from him specifically. So yeah, I hope you found it a bit, at least remotely interesting. Um, yeah, do subscribe to my channel because there's going to be more. Um, and like the video, feel free to share as well. Again, sorry for my accent. It will get better. If you do wish to donate on Subscribestar, there's a link as well. And there's a Twitter as well to my other account, so that should be helpful. But yeah, and again, I think the more videos I do, the better they're going to get as well. Um, I'm not going to tell you what's going to be the next book. You'll have to see it for yourself. You will probably see more advertising on social media on that. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and please do give me any feedback if you wish to. Goodbye.